So is Erik Ten Hag really coming back then?
Straight into it.
He does, doesn't he?
My favourite Dutch manager.
God, well, it's an unavoidable one, I think. You're spot on there.
Welcome to the EuroLeagues. We're going to talk about Bayern Munich's sensational form. We'll ask if cracks are beginning to show at Paris Saint-Germain. We're going to talk about the Champions League's country protection rule and ask if it needs to be scrapped. It will be more interesting than it sounds, I promise. We'll also do, before the end of the show, what's gone wrong at Ajax. Given we're about to dive into a discussion about competition rules, I just thought we should start with something a bit more fun and talk about the match of the match week, which for me is Club Brugge 3, Barcelona 3. Carlos Forbes got a couple of goals. Lamine Yamal scored a lovely goal. Wojciech Szczesny nearly gifted Bruges the win in the last minute. Was it a foul?
What I think made me be happy with the decision in the end by the referee was that even the Bruges player didn't really complain so much after the goal was disallowed. You could see Vermance's face. I think he knew.
You've got to sell it better, though, haven't you? That's the thing. You've got to make it look like it was obviously a goal.
Yeah. But or maybe you're just honest, not like you.
No.
And that's it. So maybe you're not a faithful on this one.
Good. Well, I never am. And look, I know Raphael kind of, to start with, that takes away from what was a beautiful game, but it did feel very, very dramatic and a little bit controversial.
Yes, although my knowledge of that game is very much secondhand because I had the pleasure of being at PSG Bayern the very same night, listening to the updates from Bruges. But what I would say is that I think Club Brugge, who are a good side, have worked out how to score against Barcelona. And this is
everybody has.
Exactly. This is a phenomenon that was very familiar to me, and I think I've mentioned this on the show a few times. In the second season at Bayern under Hansi Flick, every team had figured out how to beat the high press. And it was only the heroics of Manuel Neuer who made like an unbelievable amount of numbers of one-to-one saves, that Bayern still managed to win the title, but things were sort of beginning to fall apart. He didn't leave because of that. I think the team was still happy with him. Most of the club was still happy with him. Of course, he had this big fallout with the sporting director, Hasan Salihamidzic, but it does look a little bit like the pattern might be repeating itself.
Do you know what he looks like? He's in a boat, and the boat has got 3 or 4 holes, and the water's coming in, and he goes like, let's put a hand here and a hand there. Nothing is happening. And a bit like that in the press conference after the game. He was asked for the second time only about how permeable the defense of Barcelona is and the lack of intensity, and it just basically looks like the Barcelona last season is gone. And he just went on one. He was like, come on, I've just told you two answers before. Yeah, but that is the point of this Barcelona that's collapsing. If it wasn't for the genius of Lamine Yamal, who was absolutely brilliant again, and I think we're going to be a little bit, we're going to see a little bit this up and downs from Lamine while he recovers fully from his growing injury. What we saw was a team with a midfield that did not pass the ball or control the game enough. If you don't do that, a lot of passes and submit the opposition in their own half, in their own third, then when you lose the ball, you're exposed. And I started to think, looking around, some of the players are like, what are we doing? Is this right? And when if you start doubting, that's the end. And I think is that probably what happened at Bayern, that players felt exposed and started questioning what they were doing.
A little bit, but I think it was more that they couldn't quite get it right anymore, or the opposition had worked out how to do it. The fact that they managed to win the title, the fact that they were a little bit unlucky against PSG, of course, to get knocked out in the quarterfinals in a crazy set of games. It could have finished 6-6, 7-7. PSG just squeezed through when Lewandowski was injured, and you had Choupo-Moting up front for Bayern, missing a lot of chances. As I said, it wasn't that big of a talking point, and the more political dimension of the problem came to the forefront and kind of deflected from that. But it is a similar scenario tactically that we saw. I think it's a mixture of a lack of freshness and opposition team figure things out, and maybe the odd player saying, you know what, do I really have to press like that crazily all the time? We're winning anyway. We're good. Do we have to do this? All these things I've seen before.
Also, Bruges were really good, Guillem.
Yes, but on that kind of way that Raf is describing, they had worked Barcelona out. So in 3 passes, they could find themselves in a 1v1 with Chesney, who saved Barcelona a couple of times. But it could have been worse. You have to say as well, I think they hit the post 3 times, Barcelona. And in the bigger picture, you have to say that Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski, and Rafinha, who scored 90 goals last season, they basically only played together 200 minutes. Rafinha is injured. Lewandowski's coming back. Lamine hasn't been 100%. There is that. Also, the 3 of them work better at the pressure than certainly Rashford, Ferran, and Lamine put together. So, yes, there are explanations of why this is happening, and we need a little bit more evidence to see if it's going to be impossible to turn it around. Obviously, Hansi Flick is convinced that he can, that he needs stronger midfielders, and perhaps they'll go in the market in January. But what he perhaps forgets is that Barcelona is actually taking value out of the side by getting rid of players that earn too much because they cannot afford them. So all that has got an effect. I think the Barcelona of last season is gone now.
Jules, I was actually last night, so when Carlos Forbes was scoring his first goal last night, I was actually playing football on the pitch that he played on when he was at secondary school. True story. Because he went to school near Manchester, well, kind of suburb of Manchester in Didsbury. And we got off the pitch and my mate, who's a teacher, was like, oh, one of my students has just scored against Barcelona. So he's got a great story, hasn't he? I wonder why he didn't make it at City. I know lots of kids don't, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think to make it at City, you need to be Phil Foden level, really. Even Cole Palmer level was not enough. And then it's funny, then you go on loan, you go to different clubs, different leagues, different levels, and it just doesn't work out and it doesn't click. And then suddenly it clicks for you. And I think he fits perfectly the way Bruges are playing. He replaced Tybee, who went to Sunderland, obviously, in the summer, who was a highly rated winger. He's a different type of winger, but for what Nicky Hayden wants to do at Bruges, he's really perfect. You know, with Solis on the other side, Tresoldi in the middle. They have, Raphael is right, they've got a really good little team. And last season already, they had a good team, and they pushed City a little bit in the playoff tie. And I think they will do again. They beat Villa last season in the league phase 2 at home, albeit with a strange goal, but still, they won that game. And they hammered Monaco, for example, on match day 1 of the Champions League, again, in their own stadium. So I think they will finish top 24 and they will qualify for the playoffs. And it's a team that plays with a lot of intensity that I think in the end maybe lacks just a little bit of level and talent for the top clubs in Europe. I know this was Barcelona, but over 2 legs, I would still fancy Barcelona to go through if they had to play again on a knockout in the knockout stages. But on the day, they will cause trouble to any team.
Yeah, and just to mention, of course, that they did play against Bayern, a team that often is seen as similar to Barcelona, with a high line, with lots of spaces that can be exploited. And they basically didn't have one chance and lost 4-0. That was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. But I just wanted to mention one more thing, because I've reached the time of the week where I don't know what day it is.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't watch...
I didn't want to tell you at your old age, but yeah, it was not the same night.
Yeah,
Euroleague Thursdays.
It was Man City Dortmund I was watching last night, not PSG Bayern. That's why I missed the Bruges game. But the rest of the stuff I stick by.
Nicky Hayden, the Bruges manager, is someone that I'm desperate for us to get on the EuroLeague. So I'm issuing an open challenge live on 5 Live to producer Metin. And there are many reasons he would be great to speak to. Obviously, he's doing a brilliant job at Bruges. Do any of you know which British club he used to manage?
Can I Google it?
Well, no, but then you would know, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
the answer is Haverfordwest in the Welsh Premier. Nicky Hayden used to be the manager of Haverfordwest. So I think there will be so many amazing stories that we could get from him. So there you go, challenge issued. He would be a lovely person to have on the EuroLeague. Jules, just before we move on, I've got to say, you watch too much football, man. I mean, you are such an asset to this show. But the fact that I can just say, this obscure Bruges player, I wonder why he didn't make it, and you've effectively giving us a tactical breakdown of a team who were playing at the same time as PSG. I mean, fair play.
But because I think the talent is really interesting. And, we often say on our show on Sunday as well, on Premier League Sunday, at this level, there's no bad players. There are bad context for those players. And it's true. And sometimes you just need the right environment to shine or to explode or to get to the next level. And he's the prime example of it.
OK, for the second time in this season's Champions League, 5 of the 6 Premier League sides have all won on the same match week. So that's Arsenal in Prague, Liverpool beating Real Madrid, City beating Dortmund, wins for Newcastle over Athletic Bilbao and Spurs over Copenhagen. Given this is the EuroLeagues, we're very much looking at this through a continental lens. There's nothing new in other leagues feeling overpowered. And equally, Guillem, I'm kind of just reminding myself of the fact that it's only a couple of seasons ago that English clubs did really badly in Europe and didn't get the 5th Champions League place. But do you think there is something more marked right now about the kind of dominance that all of the other countries would love, but some would say the Premier League enjoys?
The gap is now very big. And generally, you wait for 5, even 10 seasons to come out with a conclusion. But it's now a subjective and an objective feeling that you've got when you watch, for instance, an English side against a Spanish side. They met 7 times, 6 wins for England, 1 for La Liga, 16 goals against 4. Those kinds of performances where Newcastle clearly beats Athletic Club or Real Madrid are unable to match the physicality and the pace of Liverpool, suggests that the good decisions being made at the Premier League level, using the money they've got, which, for instance, has spent in the summer more than the major 4 leagues combined in the summer, but generally through television they get more than double what La Liga gets. But the good decisions have also been made at office level. They've got really good directors of football, really good CEOs, really good commercial directors, and all that has at some point mean that the Premier League takes off. It's not just the financial reasons, it's actually the good people that are taking the decisions. And that is now it's such an obvious thing that Valverde wouldn't be asked about it after being beaten by Newcastle, but privately would say, wow, they're at another level. Physicality, the 50-50s, even the layers of the teams with very good coaches, they're not just simple teams that go 1 or 2 tactics. It's much more than that, which suggests that, should be 5 English sides in the quarters and 3 in the semis, and with the permission of Bayern or perhaps PSG, there should be finalists or close to it. So we have started a new era, I think.
I largely agree with Guillem's analysis of the overall picture, but I disagree with the conclusions. I think that for all the money, you look at the Champions League sides, and I don't think anyone will say that Chelsea, Newcastle, or Spurs are serious contenders to win this competition. Maybe not even Liverpool, although they had a good result, but as a team are not clicking at the moment. City, of course, as long as Guardiola is there, will always be among the contenders. Also, let's look at the last 15 years. How many English teams have won the Champions League in 15 years? 4.
That's why
and the money
it's
has
a new
been
era.
there. Yeah, but a new era, it's easy to say it's a new era, but it hasn't happened yet. And I don't think it will happen yet. Despite all the stuff that I agree with you, better decisions is because you don't have the stability. So the drawback of the Premier League's wealth of money and talent is that, with the exception of City and Liverpool right now, I don't think there's any team in the Premier League that knows that next year they're again in the Champions League. And that really undermines their competitiveness in the long run. Chelsea don't know if they're going to be in the Champions League again next year. Newcastle don't know. It doesn't look like at the moment. Spurs, not sure. And that's even with 5 places. And when we saw the Premier League really make a big breakthrough in Europe, it happened at a time when you had real stability in the top 4. You remember, I think it was 4 or 5 years when no one could qualify for the Champions League that wasn't Benitez, Chelsea, Ferguson's United, and Arsene Wenger. And without that stability, without that crazy competition that they have domestically to even qualify, I think it's very hard for these teams to dominate because you don't get the time to develop at Champions League level. And next year you could have Bournemouth and Sunderland and teams that will also not win the Champions League because they're not ready for it. So yes, lots of money. Yes, better decisions, great teams. But the internal competitiveness, I think, will work against them when it comes to playing in Europe in the Champions League.
I think the thing as well is that the other leagues are not improving enough. If you want to really play that kind of game of how far are we from the level of the Premier League, it's not a good season in Italy. I mean, Calhanoglu is the best player in Serie A so far this season. This is ridiculous. They don't score goals. They don't have number 9s who score goals. In Spain, okay, there's Barca and Real Madrid and they're pushing each other, but we saw Villarreal losing to Pafos this midweek in Champions League. They're the third best team in La Liga. In Germany, Bayern and company doing an incredible job. Behind that, we saw Bayer Leverkusen sacking Ten Hag after 2 games. And to be able to try to compete with the Premier League, really, you need to have everything right, the good signings, your academies to be good, the right managers on your benches, all that kind of stuff. And all the leagues are just not there right now. Whereas the Premier League, because of the money, it's okay if maybe you don't have the right manager for one season because you are so much more powerful than anybody else, so much richer. So it's okay. But the other leagues should really improve more. They should be a better level. Last season already was maybe not so good, but this season I think is even worse for the others. So if the others are not at their best, then of course the gap with the Premier League is going to get bigger and bigger. Even if I also agree with Raf, I think both Guillem and Raf made very good, valid points. But I'm just a bit disappointed by the levels of the rest, really. That's the thing.
Maybe they should get together and form a super league. Then
that would solve all problems.
That would solve all of the problems. Guillem, I think it's fascinating. And there's a myriad of kind of different aspects to it. Equally, could you look at a lot of individual clubs, and probably Barcelona is the best example, and say, well, Premier League spending is not the reason why you don't look like winning the Champions League. There are clubs of which they'd be toward the top of the list who have loads of self-inflicted problems, which have got absolutely nothing to do with the Premier League, no?
Don't they? The race to actually get a lot of money from Barcelona and Madrid have to do with the Premier League. And that it's obvious that Real Madrid have chosen a way of playing that has to do with matching the Premier League. It's the reference, but it happens sometimes. There are waves where the reference is the Spanish league or the French league or the Italian league. Right now, you want to equal and match what the Premier League are doing at all levels. Not only coaches are looking at the evolution of football through what I don't know the likes of Pep Guardiola's doing. But
sorry, in what way is Xabi Alonso sitting? Okay, what I have to do this year with this Real Madrid is to play like the Premier League.
The choice of having Xabi Alonso, that is somebody that allows you structure and stability and growth through it. 2 things. One, the trend that has been set by the Premier League. That's how the big clubs are playing. That's how City are playing, and Arsenal and Chelsea and Aston Villa, etc. And 2, Real Madrid have felt that they cannot match economically and in the market the Premier League. So is there any other way that we can match them? It's like, all right, we'll go and get young players and see if they work. But secondly, let's try to have a structure, something that gives you stability every year to challenge them. So of course, the Champions League is the target for them, has always been and will always be the biggest one. And to keep winning it, so Florentino Perez can still say it's the best club in 21st century, you have to match at least on the pitch and off the pitch the Premier League. The other way that everybody's matching it is trying to see how they sell their product. And it doesn't matter, even by taking games abroad, it's just not enough to catch them. So you have to be creative. And yes, that sharpens the tools, allows us, as Jules was saying, to bring young players through and see what happens, give opportunities to young coaches and see what happens. But we are falling behind.
But Real Madrid and Barcelona still have access to lots and lots of players who will always want to go there rather than the Premier League.
By paying less.
Absolutely.
Because they have an aura. Yes, that is that. how many more could you? I mean, these people, for instance, the Trents, the Rashfords, the Jude Bellinghams, they were brought up with the Champions League and Spanish football and Barcelona, Madrid being powerful and dominating. If that stops, will the next generation want to be to Real Madrid and Barcelona? Maybe yes, because
well, it's already stopped for Barcelona, and the answer to that question is still yes at the moment, isn't it? Barcelona haven't been a dominant European force for ages.
They certainly sell very well their story. They had a great narrative, but they cannot match the money, and they can perhaps still convince Real Madrid that the Mbappés, but the next line of players, they will go for the money to the Premier League. It's happening. They're already there.
What will it look like then, Guillem, I think this is quite a nice place to finish it. Let's fast forward 10 years, all right? And if the image that you're kind of concerned about comes to pass, what do you think the top of European football will look like?
First of all, it doesn't concern me. I'll enjoy the Premier League domination. It'd be fun. There's a lot of friends.
But you're concerned about the competitiveness, aren't you? Not concerned about English teams doing well, yeah.
Exactly. And in 10 years' time, perhaps somebody's convinced somebody else to actually have a wage cap, which I know the trade unions don't like, but they may just find a way to actually balance things out. Perhaps you could get in group stages teams from the same nation to play against each other, and then drop points that way and perhaps even be knocked out. There must be some changes that if this continues, that it will just sharpen everybody to say, okay, can we do things a little bit different with the opposition, of course, of the Premier League, the Super League of Europe.
I have a point around that country protection thing just to kind of throw to the group, because I think, Raph, it is a very valid point if we were in the old Champions League. I just wonder, with the new Champions League format, there are so many opportunities to pick up points that even if you took country protection out of it, would it make a big difference to competitive balance? And equally, would it have an impact on the mystique and enjoyment of the competition if you just turn on to listen to Arsenal Spurs again?
Yes to the second question, no to the first.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think if you make 1 out of 8 games City against Spurs, that is going to change anything. Because if they're so good that they're beating everyone else, and there's just absolutely no chance that anyone can get any points off them, then 21 points will still be enough, of course, to finish in the top 8. And the second part, I think, is more important. You play the Champions League, at least in the early stages, because you want to play different teams. You don't want to play your local teams again and have in September, Man City playing Man United in the league, and then a week later in the Champions League in a group game that doesn't really decide anything. It would take away from the whole idea of the Champions League, which is about different countries meeting each other, people traveling to different places. And I think broadcasters would hate it, and I think fans would also need to be very excited. I don't see that as a way forward.
Jules?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Rafi.
Okay. Can we finish with a bit on the format, by the way? Because it just got me thinking, Guillem, when you were talking about that as an idea. I've realised something this season, and that's that I really like the format, and I wasn't expecting to. And I'll tell you for why. These games don't really matter in the round when it comes to who qualifies.
Tell Ajax and Benfica.
Well, hold on, right? But some of the individual games are great. And I think there is an argument that is okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can enjoy watching these two teams play a competitive game and think that was a great game. And I'm not sure I need it to be the defining reason as to whether one of them qualifies or not, if that makes sense.
Put the tape of when we first discussed this.
Yes.
I think only Jules agreed with me, but it was this idea that more games against good sides is better for the competition. And the reaction from many, including some Steve Crossman, was like, no, it's going to be more boring because there's going to be more games.
I've totally changed my opinion. Totally changed my. You're right. You're exactly right.
Fair enough. I won't have a go then, but because changing opinion is part of one of the beauties of the game. But yes, It's exciting. It's great. And actually, the last game, I remember last season when Aston Villa were trying to qualify and they were just waiting the whole stadium until was it Bruges to finish the game. It makes it even exciting, and very often the end of the group stages were boring.
Let's move on to Bayern and Paris Saint-Germain then, shall we? And now we've got an opportunity to kind of really get stuck into this game. So it finished PSG 1, Bayern 2. Vincent Deluc, Jules, in L'Equipe, wrote this. PSG must continue to hope that the Champions League will perpetually be marked by two successive truths. One for autumn and one for spring. And that Bayern, who trampled them on Tuesday, will have lost their irresistible airs by the time the good weather returns. Now we'll come on to PSG, but Bayern's irresistible airs. Discuss.
I mean, Raphael should go first, really. One, because he was at the game, and two, because it's obviously his club. But just before he goes in, Joshua Kimmich said after the game that he's 30 now. He's played, I don't know how many games in his career. He started very young. He won everything that you could win. And he said that this was the first 45 minutes are 11v11, which is really the only thing we should analyze and discuss, because the 11v10, there's no point. That this first half on Tuesday night was the most intense he's ever played in. And I think I think for me, it's enough to let the floor to Rafi, because that sums it all up. And to compete with this Bayern team, at least on 45 minutes, you need to be at your best fitness-wise. And this PSG team is nowhere near their best fitness-wise.
It was amazing the first half. It was also amazing because it wasn't just Bayern. I mean, PSG, for all the problems that they have at the moment, still created chances, still had dominance, still posed a lot of problems for this Bayern team. And I spoke to a couple of players afterwards who said, I've never seen a team run this much. What are they doing in training? So that kind of physical exertion that they impose on opposition teams, even when they're not quite firing, that made it so special. It was such a high level game. And I think there is something, Stephen, in what you said earlier. I think the fact that this game was not a knockout game enabled both teams to really go for it. I think they really wanted to show who is best in Europe. And maybe would have been a bit more cagey if this is a knockout, but it wasn't. And they went for it. And of course, Bayern just had a little bit more cohesion. They have more form right now. Everything seems to work for this team. And PSG have just dropped off a little bit. I think only momentarily. I don't see any bigger issues with them. But for Bayern, having had this series of games where they've won, and every game that you win is kind of diminishing return, because you say, okay, we still haven't played anyone good yet, and this team is not good, and this team is not good. And when will we play a team that would really show us if we're good or not? It was a big validation. And the fact that they had to defend in the second half and win in a very un-Bayern way without touching the ball much made it even sweeter for them, because they're used to steamrolling teams and then switching off when they're 2-3-0 up in recent weeks and months. But this was a different way, certainly in the second half, of winning, and they loved it. And they felt that this perhaps was just as valuable as a more dominant sort of 90 minutes of total perfection ball possession dominance would have been. And it was a lovely evening all around. And of course, it was in Paris, the most beautiful city in the world. So it was a lovely evening. Lovely evening.
I need your help with this, Rafi, because there is an evolution to Vincent Kompany's Bayern from last season to this season, but I wonder if he has to do with, he imposes his idea, the positional patterns in which a player has to occupy a zone or a lane. But this year, there seems to be like a flexibility of that. Okay, everybody knows that there is patterns, there is zones that you have to do certain things, but there's a movement around that makes them very difficult to identify and to defend. Would that be right?
So, for full transparency for the listeners, I do work with one of the members of the coaching staff.
Okay.
I still think I try to evaluate things objectively, and when Bayern don't play well, I say so. But I asked that very question, Guillem. I asked it myself and asked it to people at the club. Has Kompany kind of changed? Has he evolved? Has he sort of toned down the crazy man-to-man marking and the high line? And the answer is not really. The answer is that the team just are so much better drilled in the second year that they understand when to go and when to stay. I mean, take the first goal. The first goal comes from Upamecano winning the ball 30 meters inside the half of PSG. So this is the center back jumping and winning the ball
After 4 minutes.
deep. Sorry? After 4
4 minutes
yeah.
as well, yeah. So straight in.
So they would have done these things, and they did these things against Aston Villa. They did against Barcelona last year. But then the challenge isn't quite right, or somebody else doesn't react, and then it's open, and then it's 1v1, and they lose these games. And now it doesn't happen anymore. So it's not so much that they have modified the ideas or toned them down. It's just that the team now, being also a small team and having almost the same starting 11, give or take 2 or 3 players every single game, they just get it. They just understand it. And right now they have this I can take PSG as the reference, really. What we saw from PSG in the second half of the season, where every game was just this performance where you almost felt you couldn't touch this team. This is what you have from Bayern right now, because they're in that purple patch. And as you've alluded to, the only big worry is, is it happening 6 months too early? Can they maintain it? But of course, the answer is, we can't just now play really badly and then hope that we'll improve automatically. We have to try and play as well as we can. And if we play really well now, and of course, there's another big test coming up against Arsenal in 2.5 weeks' time, then let's keep riding that wave as long as we can.
And the last thing you do against a team like that is give them, maybe not goals per se, although the Luis Diaz, the second goal is just a pure gift. He only has to finish then. But even the first one, for Nuno Mendes to lose the ball where he loses it, is at this level against a team like that, and yet there's still 3 passes and a lovely backheel inspiration from Gnabry to make that goal happen on the rebound from the first shot by Ulisse. But still, you just can't do that. It's not good enough. And Luis Enrique said after the game, those gifts that we gave them, it just can't happen. And this is it as well, when you're not maybe at your best physically, or you don't have your strongest 11 available because of injuries. It's that you make those mistakes that you would not really make. And I mean, Marquinhos gets that ball back after the kind of the 50-50 with Kane. He looks twice so he scans, he's trying to take the information, and yet the one angle, which is a bit weird because I still think he should see Luis Diaz on his right-hand side, but anyway. So it's not like if he hadn't looked at all and then it's a schoolboy error and he gets to go. But he actually is looking, and yet Luis Diaz is so quick and in a way, in a kind of a dead angle to go and nick the ball off him and then finish like he did. But it could have been 4-0 or 4-1 certainly for Bayern at halftime. And I was like, wow, okay, this is very special.
Yeah, but this ties back to the earlier discussion. I think you still need, at this level, you need everything to click, and you need your best team at 100% to win the competition. And we saw it in this game in many ways. I think if you give back a fully fit Ousmane Dembélé, if Achraf Hakimi doesn't suffer a really bad injury and has to come off, and if Desiree Doué is there as well, it's a very different game. Mm. Just as Bayern's game against Inter was very different if they hadn't missed, I think, 6 or 7 players. So you can have the best team, you can have the best league, but if you're not with your best players, if you're not in a great form at the moment, you will find a team of a similar level that will knock you out. And of course, this was not a knockout game, but you can see how small the margins are, even against a PSG team that are not quite at their best for the reasons we mentioned.
Raf, can I just say, I really appreciate your commitment to impartiality. And this is the BBC after all. But just bear in mind that I was sitting next to Julien Laurent at the Champions League final last season. And he celebrated every goal like he was an ultra. And at one point, he was high-fiving a commentator in front of him who was wearing a PSG shirt. So I'm not...
Jérôme Roten. That was for PSG and France player Jérôme Roten. But you made me sing pre-match on 5 Live.
Nobody made you do anything, Jules.
The song by the Ultra. You made me sing it.
He volunteered.
Translate it.
I asked you what the lyrics were. If you asked me the lyrics to Wonderwall, I wouldn't start going today. I was looking at the back of L'Équipe, un genou à terre, Jules, which means what?
Yeah, they fell to their knees, which is true because obviously the defeat, even if, and Rafa said it when we were together on Tuesday night, in the grand scheme of things, PSG will qualify. Bayern will. This defeat doesn't define the rest of your Champions League, obviously. But the defeat and the added injuries, to lose Dembele after 25 minutes, to lose Hakimi, of course, in the way that it happened just before the break for 6 to 8 weeks. They're hoping more 6, but they feel like it will be 8. Nuno Mendes, who played the whole 90 minutes, but twisted his knee right at the end in the 92nd or 93rd minute, who will also be out for a few weeks. Doué already, we said. Some players who are borderline with extreme fatigue. And so this is why I think L'Equipe's headline it's true that they look like a wooden beast. Is that what you say?
Wounded.
Wounded beast. Yeah, right now.
I thought you meant a Trojan horse for a second there. I was like, where's this going? There is partly, Guillem, that wonders whether, and maybe this is a good one to ask you because you're obviously more neutral here. A team has this galactic, amazing achievement they've been dreaming of. I think it would be almost inhumane to be able to maintain those same levels. I don't know how anyone would be able to do that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out why the lack of consistency of PSG, but also say of Chelsea as well, who played the Club World Cup, and they both been in the same situation of having only 3 weeks holidays, which is the one imposed by the rules, if you like. And looking into it is, the lack of experience of a team that hasn't won a lot, or at least players that haven't won a lot, and having to win again. That is the hardest thing in football. Johan Cruyff said it many years ago. The hardest season is the second one after winning. So that certainly has a bearing on it. But there is more. I was thinking, with the little pre-season, is going to be more injuries. Well, Chelsea actually are the third or fourth team with the biggest amount of injuries in the Premier League. So they're not, they haven't been, following like flies. But at the same time, that's partly down to rotations, and you're going to be forced to do rotations all season to try to find some consistency. So it's a test for the manager, not just for the players. The players themselves, yes, they probably feel that there is too many games, that they don't have time to recover. But again, that's the job of the managers to find out if individually, physically have got enough to play or not. Nobody can plan anything. They have to go game by game, depending on the reaction of the players physically, but mentally as well. Teams have got tests at the beginning of the day saying, "Are you slept okay? How is your mood?" All those things eventually makes for an 11, and for, as I said, a test to the manager. And at the end of the season, we will see if the injuries have been high or not, if the choices have been right or not, and if the rotations have been high or not. It's still a little bit too early to say, and I don't think we've seen the consequence of that summer yet. But they finding both at PSG and Chelsea that it's a completely new path. They just don't know. They go game by game and poses completely different challenges to the managers.
Interesting. Could you see then, Raf, that drop off that I think we talked about that quite a bit a lot at the start of the season, what might happen to teams involved in the Club World Cup. And then we've kind of forgotten about it to an extent. Is it possible? Well, of course it's possible. Is it likely that we are still going to see further knock-on from that?
I think it's very hard to quantify. And it's partially about the story you tell yourself. In Munich, where they also played the Club World Cup, but of course got knocked out a little bit earlier, they tell themselves the story that this was the best pre-season we've ever had. We spent 4 or 5 weeks together. We grew together. We understand tactically much better each other. And a lot of people were very worried for the reasons that you mentioned, that this small squad in a year after the Club World Cup, in a World Cup year coming up, will pick up injuries and will have big problems. But somehow, whether it's by luck or by design, or maybe they figured out a way of keeping fresh, they haven't had that. They're also running the most in the Bundesliga. So it's not, you cannot even say, they're sort of saving energy. Although on the last point, I thought I'd share with you a very good story that Bild did. They said, okay, so Bayern are running a lot, but let's look at the numbers, because the GPS vests that all the players are wearing that give you the numbers, they also pick up sprints and runs when the game is not in play, i.e., for example, when you run up and celebrate goals. And of course, nobody's celebrating more goals than Bayern. So is all these extra meters really not just a function of them all running into the opposition half and celebrating with each other? I'm not sure the numbers are conclusive one way or the other. But it's again, I think, an interesting little reminder that we should always take stats with a pinch of salt.
And there's a reason.
So go on, Jules.
No, there's just a reason, just to finish on this, there's a reason why you don't retain the Champions League. You know, there's only, two clubs who've done it in the last 40 years. It's because it's that difficult. It's difficult to win it the first time, and then it's difficult to keep it and to go back to back. I mean, let alone 3 in a row like Zidane and Real Madrid. But even back to back, you know, Guardiola and City could not do it, and Chelsea and Tuchel could not do it, and Bayern could not do it, and it's just not that easy. On top of everything that we've explained already, decompression and blah 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 and all of that, it's also the best competition for a reason, and very hard to win it.
Jules, can I just clarify one thing? When you said Jerome Roten, yeah?
Yeah?
Was that actually Jerome Roten in front of us? So hold on. So Jerome Roten, who for anyone who has not been following European football for donkey's years, played for PSG and also played for France like 10, 15 times.
And Monaco.
Okay, but he was wearing a PSG shirt. To do the commentary. So that's like if we did Sheffield Wednesday and Chris Waddle turned up in an Owls shirt to do the commentary. Is this normal? This seems strange.
But imagine Sheffield Wednesday in the Champions League final.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's very much a partial commentator.
A super fan like you, Jules. A super fan.
Listen, I'm all for it, Jules. It just made me smile. If I'd known it was him, I might have asked for a photo. I just saw you hugging some guy in a PSG top.
Yeah, it was him. We still talk about it now.
Let's talk Ajax next. They've sacked Johnny Heitinga after less than 6 months in charge. They're 4th in the Eredivisie. They're 8 points behind Feyenoord. They have lost all 4 of their Champions League games this season, which means we've got a wonderful excuse to speak to De Telegraph's Marcel van der Kraan. Hello, Marcel.
Hi, guys. All right.
Good, thank you. What's going on? Why was now the time so quickly for Heitinga?
Well, you've actually summed it up when you look at the results, but not just that. Johnny Heitinga came in as a real Ajax man, of course. You know, he played for the club. He knows the style of the club, and he promised that he would play the real Ajax style again. Bring back real Ajax football after Farioli, the Italian who couldn't do anything right in the eyes of everybody in the Amsterdam arena. Well, it didn't work out. There was no Ajax football. It was very disappointing. And yes, he did have a very poor squad, inherited a very poor team because they had to sell so many players. But there was absolutely no improvement at all over the last few months.
Marcel, is Erik Ten Hag really coming back then?
Straight into it.
He does, doesn't he?
My favorite Dutch manager.
God, well, it's an unavoidable one, I think. You're spot on there. 2 days ago, Erik Ten Hag was spotted and pictured outside a place where Alex Cruz, the technical director, and his agent, Kees Vos, were all present. And of course, they said, well, you know, we always have a meeting. We like to have a coffee. Well, 48 hours later, the current manager is sacked. What's new? For this Sunday, there'll be an assistant in charge, Fred Grimm, not a very experienced coach at top level. So we think that's a very temporarily job for him. And I expect Erik Ten Hag to arrive very soon.
Marcel, is there an agreement of what this Ajax style is now? Or does the little battle, especially from people that come from the outside into the club, trying to say, let's evolve it, let's move it on, and the people in the club, so people that have known a successful Ajax say, no, let's go back to what Ajax is. Is there a common ground at all? Do we know what the Ajax way is?
Well, it's mostly based on the history of the club. And we can look at a long, deep history. You know, Cruyff brought it in the 70s, etc. Louis van Gaal continued in the 80s, 90s. But more recently, Erik Ten Hag was very successful 4 or 5 years ago. He was doing brilliantly with really, really good academy kids. And maybe the academy kids who know how to play attacking football, who love to play a 4-3-3 or ideally a 3-4-3, that's what the club is used to. But when you don't have the real talent anymore, when they're not coming through the academy, because the academy is not as great anymore as it used to be, you will have to rely on players from the outside. And they do struggle to adapt to that Ajax style. They're not brought up with it. They weren't used to it in their own clubs. And I think that is the main problem. And then it comes to buying really, really cleverly. Well, that was done for ages with Mark Overmars in charge. But Mark Overmars had to leave after a scandal. You know, the president of the club had to go. There was all kind of board members going. Edwin van der Sar had a brain hemorrhage. He had to go. Well, it was all together. It was a disaster, and that disaster is not being repaired by the current people.
Was he a bit naive, Johnny Heitinga, to kind of go on the whole sort of make Ajax great again thing? Did people really think, oh, yeah, this sounds like something which is likely to happen?
Fully agree with you there, Steve. He was in a great job at Liverpool.
Yeah.
He was having a great time with Arne Slot. The two of them had it going. Is it a coincidence that Liverpool was stuttering at the beginning of this season when that duo in charge at Liverpool and at Anfield was not doing it anymore? He arrived thinking, well, I've had a great year under Arne Slot. I know how to manage a team. I've learned a lot. He arrived at Ajax thinking he could do it all. But when you arrive at a big club like that, in trouble, in financial trouble, no hierarchy, no proper playing style anymore, it's a lot to take on when you've just been just an assistant, and maybe he underestimated the job completely.
Marcel, we know about the structural issues that Dutch football have, and they're not alone in that by getting swallowed up by the bigger leagues, and the money is a real issue as well. But one thing that they should still be able to do is, of course, create local talent, develop local talent, both on the coaching side and on the playing side. You said earlier that the academy is not doing that. Can you put your finger on why that stopped to happen? Because there used to be a production line. Even in the really bad days that they had, there was still one or two players every year that would go on and do something special somewhere else.
Well, I think in this case, it's not a national issue. It's more that Ajax have maybe become, after their great success in selling so many players, slightly arrogant. They've been accused of that before, thinking they could do it all. I mean, at the moment they have one of the directors, Marijn Buker, said, well, Ajax will soon be the biggest academy in the country again. Well, based on what? That is just hoping that it will happen. And at the same time, PSV Eindhoven, Feyenoord Rotterdam, both producing lots of talent. If you look at the national youth teams, all the teams are full with kids from Feyenoord and PSV Eindhoven. AZ Alkmaar even, great young team. I know they didn't survive tonight, but in general, doing really well, making huge profits on selling. So I think in this case, it is more an issue at Amsterdam Johan Cruyff Arena.
Just out of interest, Marcel, before we let you go, does Erik Ten Hag do in the Netherlands what he did in Germany and a lot in England, which is reference Harry Potter in press conferences? Every time something's going wrong, because I'm not Harry Potter. I don't know if he always did that at Ajax or not.
Well, his press conferences always were very famous and full of fun.
Right.
People have been mocking him about his communication or lack of communication skills in press conferences, and I'm looking forward to next week if they appoint him quite quickly, and we're going to have some cracking press conferences again, I think.
Lovely. Marcel, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Guillem, Raf, Jules, thank you all very much. Speak to you soon.
Cheers.
Guillem Balague, Raphael, Honigstein and Julien Ron, who've been with us on the EuroLeague.
The Football Daily Podcast on BBC Sounds.